Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition. Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and our 6th review for the Bad Batch, episode 6, Decommissioned. It's going to be good. We talk about that with Blake in the Escape Pod, and stay tuned for the end of the episode, or halfway through about, where we start talking about unproduced Clone Wars episodes, the stories there, the Clone Wars legacy, as well as produced stories in the form of books or comics between episodes 6 and 7, what the connections are to the First Order and the Empire, and the potential that they have to move forward with telling stories in that time period. Right here on Star Wars Escape Pod. Stay tuned for all that good discussion. Let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
Welcome back, sir.
Hello, hello. Good to be back.
Always good to have you back. We have the newest Bad Batch episode released.
That's true. Yep.
And, we're... I don't know what to say about this one. It was good, but we'll break it down. Actually, hold on. Let me just read the summary, and then we'll kind of go from there. So, Sid hires the Bad Batch to retrieve a Separatist tactical droid for its battle intel before it is destroyed at the Corellian decommissioning site. They encounter police droids guarding the facility, as well as Trace and Rafa Martez, who are also after the droid. Wrecker accidentally hits his head, and his inhibitor chip begins to activate. Tech and the sisters, yeah.
It says wow.
It does, yeah, it does. This is on the Wikipedia. This is like a tiny little summary. Tech and the sisters program the tactical droid to turn on the police droids, allowing them to escape, but the tactical droid is destroyed in the process. The sisters explain that they are retrieving it for a client who's fighting the Empire. Hunter gives them a copy of the droid's data that Tech makes during the fight, and the sisters later tell their client how to find the Bad Batch. So there's a slew of things here to talk about, and I know you've got a few notes, so we'll kind of go through those in order. But what's the first kind of thing that you noticed in this episode?
Well, you already talked about the biggest thing on here, so I don't want to address it right away. We could build up to it.
We'll break down the details. We'll break down the details.
I think we should work our way up to there. Jeez, Wikipedia just giving all the spoilers here.
I know. It's kind of great.
All in one breath. Don't even lead you in. No dinner first.
This is our review. I mean, people have seen this episode. Anyone who's listening, obviously, it's the review. So, anyone who's seen this now. The people wanted to hear our opinions about all this good stuff. So
who do you think writes these? The episode's only been out for a couple hours.
I don't know.
Is it Dave Filoni? Dave Filoni hits go on Disney Plus.
I wonder.
Himself.
1201. You know, like the day it hits Friday. It's like, yeah, you gotta update that Wikipedia. Yeah, gotta add my name to the credits.
Just doing it all himself to make sure nothing is missed in the entire episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Why even watch it? You could just read the synopsis.
Exactly. It's the poor man's Disney Plus. It's
like picking up the book, reading the back cover, and then saying, "Yeah, that's the whole book."
Anyone who doesn't want to subscribe to Disney Plus, you just read the 2-sentence summary on Wikipedia.
You get all the info you need.
Yeah. No, but truth be told, though, I mean, this show is so far, as nice as it is and impressive as it is, I do find there's generally a little less to talk about because it's not arc based, and we're going through this on a weekly basis, and quite frankly, I mean, we brought up the whole issue with Echo and how little he's used, right? But I mean, as far as the characters go, I find that the development is just very slow right now.
Yeah,
and it's
true.
more I guess what we discussed before about these filler episodes, which are pretty much just setting up the premise of the the groundwork, I guess, for the following seasons, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to take a little bit to kind of get rolling, I think. A little faster, but
I think
this was a cool episode.
We are seeing some progress.
Yeah, we're seeing some progress for sure.
It's like kind of like baby steps, right? I feel like the last like 3.5 episodes have been just kind of inching towards slowly showing you that something's going to happen with Wrecker.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the main point.
You've been on that train for a little while, and now it's obvious that that's where it's going, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is pretty cool. And if you want to take a moment to talk about that, how many episodes has now been that he's been hitting his head in every single one? Like,
he hit his head for the first time when they crashed, which was 2 episodes ago. So I think it's 3 in a row where his head has been bothering him.
Right. Okay. And of course, Fennec Shand also, smokes his head into the wall, and it keeps happening. It keeps happening.
I mean, it's been 4 episodes. I forgot about that one.
Yeah. So almost every single time now he just keeps having these head injuries, and after that amount of times, I think
it's like a hockey player. Yeah,
like
getting concussions.
Like inhibitor chip or not, there's going to be some damage there.
Yeah, they made it really obvious this time though. He was actually saying almost completing the line.
Yeah, he was saying what Crosshair was saying, right?
Yeah, or all the clones. Good soldiers follow orders.
Good soldiers follow orders. Yeah.
That was cool though. They had like the flashback sound effect going on.
That was pretty cool. I like that a lot. What do we think of the Martez sisters showing up in this episode? Because the last time they showed up was in the Ahsoka arc in season 7 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and they were pretty much the whole center point of that arc, aside from Ahsoka herself. But she was kind of sucked along in their trouble that they made for themselves. And is it what's their names? Rafa and Trace.
Yeah, that's
Martez.
Right.
They drive the Silver Angel, and always getting into trouble. So a quick recap about Trace and Rafa is that their mother and father were both inadvertently killed as a result of the Jedi's attempt to recapture Zero the Hutt. And Zero the Hutt was broken out of prison by Cad Bane early on in season. Actually, it was the last episode of season 1. But chronologically, of course, that placement is further down the chain. But it was one of the first season episodes, actually. And that event of him getting away, they never actually, in the episode, they didn't pursue that. Like, you just saw them kind of flying away on a speeder. But in season 7, Ahsoka's actually filled in about that event. And the Martez sisters basically say that the Jedi actually pursued that speeder. And Zero still got away, but there was a big accident that happened with a bunch of ships crashing into each other, and one of them came clean into a wall or something, and their parents were killed in the incident.
On the other side.
And so, and this was in the lower levels in the underworld, and down there, the Republic was being the Republic and not really doing much about things like that. And so they've always had a bit of a blind kind of a bit of a sting towards the Republic. They've always felt a little bitter about it until Ahsoka kind of changed their minds on how they thought about the Jedi and how they help other people and stuff like that. And you can see that there's been a progression between that, obviously, how the arc ended and going their separate ways from Ahsoka, and how she's kind of influenced them. And they seem a little, especially Rafa or Trace, the older one. Rafa, yeah. So she definitely feels a little more warm of a character and less of this colder. Yeah.
When we first met her in Clone Wars, she was just a straight up downright smuggler.
Yeah. Wanting to get into trouble, right?
Yeah, even like just lying to her sister to get what she wanted done, to go on some schemy plan.
Doing anything for a buck, right? Yeah. So taking on all the sketchy jobs, getting themselves into trouble, and So yeah, it's cool to see that development, and again, like I'm a bit unsure as to whether or not I feel good about constantly using characters that we know. Of course, it makes the galaxy feel a bit smaller, but
True.
at the same time, it's like I actually don't mind that, because in a way, even though it does shrink the galaxy a little bit in a way, it also still makes it feel like Star Wars. Right?
Yeah, but it helps you with the characters you already know. You kind of get to see their arc and see how they grow.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
now we know they're still doing schemes.
Yeah, now we know where they're at, right? And by the end of the episode, we're also aware now of the fact that they're working with somebody who's willing to fight the Empire. So who is this?
That's true.
Is it Bail Organa, maybe? Mon Mothma?
Well, I was trying to look at the character here from the hologram. Always sees the shoulder, but it looks like a robe.
It does look like a robe, but it makes me wonder, it Ahsoka maybe?
No, I don't think so.
Ahsoka's been involved with the rebellion. Like, she's working with Bail Organa, right?
Yeah.
And so, how in the Ahsoka novel, bigger
shoulders. To me, it looked like a male, and it's probably not. But the closest character I could think of, it had the right shape, the right color, and the right size to be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
You're thinking it's Obi-Wan? Yeah.
Just based on the image, I feel like that's a long shot just on what's going on. But the model that we saw, that little section, to me looks, from characters we know, most like Obi-Wan's robes. But it could be another Jedi.
Right.
Or any other character that wears robes.
Well, here's the thing about this, is that if there's any kind of, I mean, I've brought it up before. The Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith comic books are the closest thing to this timeline that we have. So if there's any reasonable speculation for any notable characters to show up of any kind, the answer is in that comic book, in a way, as to like who's alive, what kind of Jedi are floating around, who could possibly cross over from that into this show. And the librarian is actually Jocasta Nu. She's actually alive. She's in the Vader comics, and
what?
So she survived the purge. And I'm not going to say much more because you still have to read those comics that I keep telling you to read.
And the captain is supposed to go down with the ship, and her ship was that library.
Yeah, so there's a story there to be told, but it makes me wonder, maybe is she possibly this character?
Could be.
And anyone who has read those comics and knows what happens, it's like, because obviously she's not around, in the later stuff. We'll know what happens to her, but at the same time, it's like, it's still a possibility that they could kind of take that route, I guess, and use the illusion of time between stories to say, hey, this actually happened and she was actually involved with the rebellion or whatever.
It's too fast, man. It's been like 2 weeks since Order 66. I mean, I think that's also the case for Obi-Wan.
Actually, I think it's been a couple months though, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like it's been a couple months. I think by the end of the first season, they'll have probably brought us up to at least a year of time.
By the end.
Of it, yeah.
But even so, like, that's why I don't, like, even though it looked like Obi-Wan, I don't think it could be him. Maybe it's Bail. It could be Bail.
Okay, here's a wild theory of mine. What if it's Furious Olin? What if they just brought him back into canon? Furious Olin, everybody. Furious Olin. Jedi Quest, rivaled Anakin Skywalker back at the temple. Got kicked out of the Jedi Temple before the Purge. He's
so obscure.
It's a very obscure character. He's not obscure enough to not have a Star Wars miniature, one of the many, but he's got it. And he had his own book series. It was called The Last of the Jedi, and he and Obi-Wan were the two main characters of that series. Lasted 10 books. I think it was 10 books or 9 books or something. And he's honestly one of my favorite characters from the EU. He's got to be. I really enjoyed where they took his story, but he did survive the Purge.
And you say
very similar to Ahsoka. He wasn't in the Order at the time, so
And you explain him as like the budget version of Anakin?
No, he was a rival of Anakin's. So him and Obi-Wan and Furious and his master all went on missions together when the two were Padawans back at the academy. And Anakin is this prophesized chosen one who gets all the attention in the world, right? And Furious was this kind of like this jealous other guy that he was really gifted at what he does, but he him and Anakin just butt heads a lot. And there was an event that happened between the two of them that basically allowed Furious to be disbanded from the Jedi Order. He was kicked out, right?
Yeah, I think you can say spoilers here. This is an old book that is
this is like we're talking 2004 or something. This is Star Wars Legends Scholastic, kids series.
Yeah, and Wikipedia can spoil stuff that's been out for 45 minutes. I think you can spoil this book.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was a cool series, and I don't know. I mean, I've always hoped that they would bring him back into canon. Maybe he's maybe this is his chance, his window to come back. Man, I don't know. Very low chances.
Yeah,
there,
if it happened, I wouldn't be entirely surprised that they revived another character.
Yeah,
but I'm not expecting that in any way.
Here's the thing. Okay, we know for sure it's not canon, right? Like absolutely not for sure it's canon. Like if they want to honor the very first canon book ever, which is A New Dawn, it's not going to be canon. So, the question is, if it's not Bail, if it's not these obscure characters like Furious or Jocasta Nu or whatever, or Kenobi even, because also pretty unlikely.
Yeah,
who do you think it is?
He's gonna be fresh on Tatooine.
Yeah,
that's like I feel like it would have to be someone who showed up in Rebels, right?
Is it possibly Saw Gerrera? He's already showed up. Maybe they're gonna.
No, he wouldn't.
But then I don't know why they would hide that. It's like they've already shown him in the show.
Yeah, so. I don't think it's him.
Here's a crazy theory. What if it's Darth Maul?
Because they've already done this over the shoulder Darth Maul shot.
Well, I mean, see, Maul's the kind of guy that would have the same thoughts as Saw Gerrera. An extremist point of view, now's the time to take down the Empire while it's still weak, right?
But he's not involved in the rebellion.
No, but they weren't confirmed to be in the rebellion because the rebellion is not a thing yet. It's just all these rebel cells and stuff like that. Yeah, like this is just somebody who sees an opportunity to fight off the Empire before it's too strong, right? So Maul obviously hates the Empire. He was ready to team up with Ahsoka to kill Vader and Palpatine, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a chance that maybe he's pursuing that route still. And maybe this leads into the whole Crimson Dawn thing. Maybe Crimson Dawn is a product of organizing criminals or smugglers or whatever to power gain against the Empire. But it ended up obviously being a failed attempt. It turned into a criminals organization. But I mean, what if that was the case? That would be pretty nuts. That'd be pretty crazy to think that Maul was actually part of a rebel cell that was not a part of the rebellion, but likewise still, not doing Sith stuff, but actually part of a group that was fighting Imperial forces.
It'd be neat, but if it's Maul, I'm not that surprised because he's always doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
It's not really a big reveal to me. It's like, there he is again.
They've done this a few times now.
There he goes again.
I mean, here's the thing, though. They did this with Big Fortuna, where they were like, who it is? Like, who is it? And then at the end of the episode, it's like, oh, it's Bib. So, like...
maybe that's the idea. They wanted to...
Maybe they want to like try and trick us. So this time, this is the double. What is it? The double deception or whatever. The double. Like they're trying to trick us by sort of not tricking. Yeah, they're doing the other one first to think like, oh, they're not going to surprise us with this one. It'll be someone that we know, but it actually is someone that's going to be super obscure.
I admit that's pretty clever.
Because it's the same shot. Like you get
the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Close up in the hologram, and it's like, oh, you don't know who it is. But this time around, we didn't find out who it is at the end of the episode. Maybe we will in the next one if we're lucky. If it's not in the next one, it's gonna wait for a while, and then we know for sure it's gonna be someone big.
That's what I think is what's gonna happen. I think this is my future telling here. I think the Wrecker stuff is about to really start rolling. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to start going down what I was saying. They're going to figure out the chip. They've already talked about getting the brain scanner. So they're going to use that, take his out. And then probably that's going to start playing into Crosshair stuff. I think that's where they're going next. And then they're going to start chasing these. I don't think they'll successfully get to Crosshair, but they're going to start working on a plan. And they'll probably get to him later in the season.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so who was this mystery figure? I don't know. I'm looking forward to finding that out. R7A7 actually showed up in this episode. I don't know if you noticed that. When the Martez sisters were running towards their ship, they said R7 prep the ship or whatever, something over the intercom.
Yeah. I was confused at first because I thought that was like the clone's ship. I'm like, I don't remember that droid being there. Yeah.
So R7 was actually Ahsoka's loyal companion droid through the Clone Wars. Oh. And his first appearance was in Storm over Ryloth, and was in that Ryloth trilogy as in her green and red starfighter, and he's a green and red and silver droid. Very identical to R2 in a way. Yeah.
Color coordinate.
Yeah, definitely. And he was also in the finale of the Clone Wars show. And I have this vague memory that he got destroyed in that arc, but I guess not, because now he's showing up in this episode.
That's true.
Here's the weird part though, is like every shot that he's in that ship before they land and the Bad Batch goes off into their ship, he's Ahsoka's R7A7 droid. We know that for sure. All the shots after that with Trace and Rafa on their ship again, moments later, they take off. He's actually different colors. He's black and orange.
Oh.
Super strange. I have no idea why. Maybe he's not R7A7 after all, but they used that droid's model, kept the textures for half the sequence, forgot to change them, and then intended it to be a different R7 droid.
So that was in this episode. He changed color.
Yeah, it was at the very, very end.
What in the world?
Yeah, it was really hard to notice because he's black in the other shots, but I had to rewind it. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, is that... So if you go to 20 minutes and 24 seconds in the episode, there's a clear shot of the back of him where he's got orange plates on him and the rest of him is all black and silver. So he's clearly in those shots a different droid. But in the other ones, he's definitely Ahsoka's droid. And so it makes me wonder, like, is this supposed to be Ahsoka's droid, or is it intended to be a different R7 unit?
Look now,
R7A7. It's maybe R7A3 or whatever, right? Who knows?
Look now, everyone listening, because as soon as word gets out, they're going to fix it like they did with Captain Jeans.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, look now before they change it like the Mandalorian episode. I mean, with these streaming services, they can change stuff, right? Like they can go back and edit. And,
you should take screenshots.
Yeah, I'm actually just doing that right now. I'm going to throw it up on the Twitter. Yeah. Guys, check the Twitter, SW Escape Podcast. You can find it there. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, how likely is it that this is intended to be a different droid or not? Like, or if it is Ahsoka's droid and intended to be Ahsoka's droid, maybe the black and orange thing was just a mistake, then is it possible that she's been like Ahsoka's been no, is it possible that maybe that is the case, or if Ahsoka has paid them a visit, very similar to how Rex paid Cutler Quaid a visit?
Yeah,
right. Like,
it's tricky because this is so early in the Empire. Like,
right,
it's been like at best a month. I don't even think it's been that.
Yeah,
but in this time period before Rebels, if Ahsoka does come onto the show, this is where she would get the idea to start doing the rebel cells. So there could be something that inspires her to do that if she shows up.
Right. It's definitely possible. I would like to see Ahsoka show up on the show. I mean, I don't really
too much at that point. She's in everything.
At that point, she is in everything, right? And here's the thing, though, is like it's realistic to think that she would still be around, doing whatever she's doing after the Ahsoka novel in this book. And the Ahsoka novel is still canon to many levels. It's just those flashback sequences that have now been overwritten by the new finale of the Clone Wars. But the main events in that book that take place in the present are very much still relevant in many ways. So is this book, perhaps, does it take place before this episode, or, I'm not entirely sure as the details of the timeline, but I mean, it's definitely worth looking into. Anyone listening, I mean,
it's not canon anymore anyway. They already wrote over it.
It's just the flashbacks.
We've been over this.
Honestly, if that book, it was okay. I mean, I didn't hate on the book. I wasn't the biggest fan of the book. It's just, it was nice. It was nice to get
a book for sure.
Out of the whole book, I honestly liked the flashback sequences the most out of that whole novel, because at the time Clone Wars was canceled, we didn't know how it ended, right? So it was the only thing that we had to get an insight into how the show actually finished, right?
Now Dave's probably just annoyed that they put that flashbacks in a book, and now they keep ruining his plans because they're in the way. You can't change stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's it's got a numerous amount of questions behind it, as far as Dave taking these literacies and sticking close-ish to them, but not exactly to them.
It's true.
It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation about the Kane and Caleb Doom thing. It doesn't really bother me that much, but at the same time, it's also like, why?
It's a slippery slope thing that
it's a slippery slope for sure, because it can only go downhill if they diverge too far. Right?
Yeah, if they start to take it too lax on changing stuff, then we're in a situation where we were before Disney bought it and wiped out the EU anyway. So then
exactly. Yeah, because the EU has a lot of good consistencies. Like they did a great job at trying to keep continuity where they could, and Leland Shee, I think, played a very big part in that back in the day, as well as the others who were involved in that continuity of the Legends or the expanded universe at the time.
They did a great job with what they had for resources.
Yeah, for sure. But now, I mean, it's Lucasfilms. They got the whole story group thing going on, and they're the whole idea of disbanding from the EU to do this new canon narrative is exactly how you put it. It's like now everything's going to be continuity built, right? So if they're intentionally starting to pull away from that, I mean, like, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I think that bothers me more than the details of a comic that might disappear if for the sake of putting that event in a live action or animated show.
Yeah,
right?
If they just like tweak it but keep the main points the same.
Yeah. Like I think I care less about that than the principle of them doing it in the first place. So if that makes any sense at all.
No, I agree. They're different like levels, but being accepting one, I'm fearful of the other. Yeah, for sure. So, overall, we got some more character development with Omega and stuff as well, learning how to fight with her bow and arrow and stuff like that. But which we kind of saw coming from the trailer, right?
Yeah.
So that wasn't a surprise. We found out that she's got limp noodle arms.
Yeah. We can see it too. Is there anything on this episode that you didn't, or that we haven't mentioned before or haven't brought up yet and you want to talk about a little more, or?
Story-wise, I think we've kind of hit all the big stuff. I had a handful of just stuff from this episode I thought was just cool that I kind of wrote down.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Well, the first thing that honestly caught my eye was watching it. I was showing my girlfriend the show for the first time because she was here, and she was also just taken aback at how pretty the show is. So we're on Corellia, and we're seeing the factory from far away with all the ambiance and stuff, the smoke and everything. It was gorgeous. It was really well done, so well lit, and all the painted textures. It's like you're looking at a Ralph McQuarrie painting. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, and not like Rebels, Ralph McQuarrie painting, because
no.
We've had that discussion about Rebels. But yeah, I mean, it's such a nice looking show, you know, and it all brings me back to the art style of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which this is heavily continuous of, right?
Yeah, I think it's the same, just slightly modernized.
Yeah, it's basically just Clone Wars Season 7 style, but we're keeping on going on that train, you know? And I think that's what people like to see of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. You know, it's a sequel show. I mean, when I saw the teaser of that Clone Wars logo burning away into the Bad Batch logo, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the Clone Wars sequel that I think that we're getting that I never knew I wanted. But I mean, I want them to finish the Clone Wars still. But I mean, it's nice that we have a sequel show. Yeah,
that actually raises a question to me, though. Like, let's be honest. The only reason this show exists is because Disney realizes they made a bad call canceling Clone Wars.
Yeah, they did.
Like, that's what it is. Let's be entirely honest with ourselves. This was like the easiest thing they could do without them essentially admitting that they did wrong and bringing Clone Wars back.
Yeah, they basically threw us a bone with the short half-season finale that they gave us, and went ahead with a sequel show to Clone Wars, and not like a sequel show in the form of Star Wars Rebels, which took it a notch downwards in quality and age targeting to fit their Disney XD standards. But this is a show that's for Clone Wars fans and designed to be a sequel to that audience, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, as you put it, as close that they can get to not to kind of partially admitting that they were wrong about canceling Clone Wars in the first place.
Because honestly, I think that's what it is. But
honestly, though, everyone knows it, though. I don't like, they should just embrace it and just give us what we want. Give us those 20 something or 30 episodes that they still haven't delivered with Clone Wars. I don't care if they don't adapt redo the Dark Disciple novel, the Son of Dathomir comic book. Like, it would be cool to see those in episodes, but if they want to save some money and leave it be and just do the ones that we haven't seen yet, I'd be fine with that too. Like, as long as we have the context of the show in place.
Honestly, now that we've seen some Order 66 stuff, though that is probably still my first choice, is seeing the rest of the story arcs that would take place over that time period, both before and after. Yeah. But what we know of arcs that I most want to see is the Cad Bane Boba Fett stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really want that too. And there's some speculation that this arc could be talked about or flashed back in the Book of Boba Fett series coming later this year. There's a lot of potential with that series because, and if we don't get anything in regards to that, maybe it's possible that they might go back and do that arc anyways. You know, I mean, like, nothing's stopping Disney from making a new series called Clone Wars Tales or whatever, and like making a new show that just has arcs based on the unadapted, unproduced Clone Wars episodes, and making a new show that just slots into the Clone Wars somewhere, and they're telling all these other stories that, you know, that have to do with these other characters. And in a normal scenario where we had 22 episode seasons with 20 minutes each, that was normal. Like, we would spend 3 episodes with these random bounty hunters and stuff. And that's what made that show so cool. It's like, you got all these different stories happening. If they didn't want to do that with Clone Wars and they just want to cut it off and like, okay, let's move on to something else, I'd be fine with another show. It's just, you know, give it a new title. And it's like, these are still Clone Wars episodes.
Though. Like, that's, I think, part of the issue they're going to have doing it is if they do a show that isn't already like Clone Wars, which doesn't exist yet, the story they have written probably won't work because you can't have time gaps, right? Because if we were to watch it in Clone Wars, I think it was the reels they released or what, if Dave talked about it, wherever the info came out.
Yeah.
It was going to be several episodes that weren't back to back because you're going to have probably at least two arcs because you're going to have Boba signing on to work with Cad Bane and Cad Bane relenting to teach him. And then there's got to be a period of time. And then they have to have their falling out where there's the duel. And you can't have that as just like one series without... It'd be tricky because you have to have really big time gaps within the series itself.
So then it makes me wonder if it's possible that they could do long animated movies instead. Because if they were looking to do anything, because like what they could do is take whatever amount of episodes that they would produce to make an arc and make it an hour and a half long animated movie, right? Because now they're getting very comfortable with Bad Batch of producing 30-minute episodes, right? So if they just keep doing that thing and stitch a 3-episode arc together, that's an hour and a half, which is long enough to be a movie in fairness. And what they could do is just call it something. It would just be an animated Star Wars movie, and it would just, like many other things in the Star Wars timeline, just take place during or between these other things. And they would leave it up to fans or StarWars.com to update their Clone Wars list and just say, hey, it exists right here. And that's all they need to do, right? And we'd still be getting Clone Wars stuff. It just might not be called Clone Wars. It might be called The Adventures of Cad and Boba or something. I don't know, right? The Bane Wars or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like, I would love that. I would love that, if that's how they continued Clone Wars legacy, bring it on. I really want to see those story arcs for sure.
Yeah, so. They got to do something because... What we saw with the reel, did they release the Cad Bane reel?
No, it wasn't the full reel. They had released they'd released a sequence of proxy animation shots.
Yeah, that's what it was. Because I know that's where Boba gets the dent in the helmet.
Yeah, that's where he kills Cad Bane and gets the dent in the helmet. Spoilers if anyone didn't see this already a couple of years ago. So, it was cool. And it would have been nice to actually have that in some consumable Star Wars material, but people loved those bounty hunter arcs, with Bosk cool. and Boba, and they were highlights of the show.
Shut up, Dengar!
Shut up, Dengar!
I love how that's what Dengar's now known for.
I love how Simon Pegg has the privilege of playing a character in the prequels.
That's true.
That guy, man. He's got a hate on for anything that's not Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Or the movies that he's in. And, I got to say, I can say this openly because he's actually talked about it openly on interviews and stuff like that. But, it's very clear that he's not the biggest fan of those movies or any other movie aside from, his favorite movie. And lo and behold, he voices Dengar in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And,
that's pretty funny.
It's like,
but it's an original trilogy character, so he probably justifies it like that.
Yeah, he probably does. He's like, I don't care when it takes place. It's an original trilogy character, so.
You know what you should do? You should make an audio clip that is Simon Pegg like ranting about the new Star Wars or prequels or whatever, and then just every so often just cut in like, shut up, Dengar.
Yeah. Shut up, Simon. Or Peg. Maybe Peg sounds better. Shut up, Peg.
That's pretty funny. That being said, I like his comedy, so
yeah.
What are you gonna do? He's a funny guy.
He's a talented guy too. He's very much into the writing, producing part of Hollywood these days. He's doing pretty well with being involved in. I think he's been involved in the most recent Mission Impossibles a little more with like the writing aspect of that. Those have been great.
He directed one of them.
Did he direct one of them?
While being in it, yeah.
Yeah, he directed some. I'm just looking at. Shaun of the Dead actor. Anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about.
That's what I know him for, and I'll always know him for is Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah,
such a classic.
Yeah, and he's also in The Boys as Hugh Campbell, Huey's dad. So, he's a big name in Hollywood these days, filming Mission Impossible 7 and 8 and
it's funny
back to back.
It's actually quite crazy to see where he's gotten to, considering he was originally known for Shaun of the Dead was his first movie, I think, or one of them. But he just did like his BBC sitcom.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how actors can make it so far in their career. And
yeah,
actually, I want to take a moment to talk about our one of our favorite voices on Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Matt Lanter, who has voiced Anakin Skywalker for years on the show, and had a brief cameo in Star Wars Rebels, and had a brief live action cameo in The Mandalorian as the New Republic officer aboard the ship that ends up getting knifed in the stomach by the Twi'lek. And Matt Lanter has more recently been on a live action show called Jupiter's Legacy, which is on Netflix. He plays one of the characters in the past, the flashbacks, and this guy, man, he's a talented actor, but he has this ability to constantly get hired on shows that get canceled after the first or second season.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Because he was on that.
He was on Timeless.
Show.
It was Timeless, Jupiter's Legacy, Star-Crossed. And aside from Timeless, which I watched the first episode, I didn't watch the whole show. Aside from Timeless, I watched those other two shows, Star-Crossed and Jupiter's Legacy, because he's in it.
Yeah.
And both those shows got canceled.
Oh, man. What is this?
Clone Wars was canceled. What is up with this guy? Dude, he's got a curse on him. It's like the curse of the chosen one. He's not so chosen after all.
That's right. Well, he's got to have all his limbs cut off and then turn to evil. So if each of his shows is a limb.
Oh, man. Dude, no one knows a cancellation like Matt Lanter does. I mean, he's been hired on so many shows that have been canceled now. It's insane.
I kind of want to see him be on like a panel and people are asking him questions, and then you can just ask him, why do all your shows get canceled?
Yeah, totally. Oh, man, you gotta bring that to Comic-Con or Fan Expo or something if he ever shows up, and we gotta do it. We gotta bring that question.
Oh, man, he'd probably have a good laugh about it.
He probably would. He's a nice guy.
Honestly, just bad luck. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, it's bad luck. I mean, he's a great actor. It's he does a great job, and right. I mean, it's too bad, right? It's too bad. But I was thinking about it the other day when I was reading this news that Jupiter's Legacy was canceled. I was like, man, what is up with this guy's career? I mean, just any show he's on, it's just the cancellation headline. It comes out.
That's pilots, man.
Brought all the PTSD back to the Clone Wars days.
Each time.
Each time.
The news, Matt Lanter's show canceled again. Josh had to take a day off from work.
I sat through a whole season of Star-Crossed, which is basically Pocahontas with aliens. And I watched it because Matt Lanter was in it. Yeah. And it got canceled. And it left on a massive cliffhanger. Yeah.
Is that always what happens?
Every time.
If Matt Lanter could time travel and be any show, with his luck, he would have been on Firefly.
Yeah, what are the chances of that? I was very surprised to see that Zac Efron was actually in Firefly. He plays the boy version or the boy flashback of the Doctor on the ship.
Oh, really?
I forget his name now. But yeah, there was one episode where they flash back to the Doctor and his sister. Yeah, Simon's past. They flash back to that. And Zac Efron actually plays him as a boy, which is pretty nuts.
That's fun. I didn't know that was Zac Efron.
Yeah, Zac Efron.
He's so young there.
He's like 7 years old or 10 years old or something like that. It was a long time ago.
Hollywood's a small place.
It is a small place. Yeah, it's like, and it's feeling like the Star Wars galaxy in that sense. It's feeling small.
Smaller and smaller all the time.
Smaller and smaller all the time, man. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, I mean, that sums up Bad Batch episode 6. I don't know, is there any last things you want to say on that before we kind of move on to the next thing?
Well, there's a couple things I thought worth pointing out. This one's pretty small, but this is the first time we've ever seen an Athorian speak Basic.
Yeah, he was wearing the voice translator.
Yeah, he had like a big translator thing on his back there.
I think we may have seen it once, but it's not very common. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we saw it once in the Clone Wars in a diner or of some kind. And I forget if it was the one where Anakin goes in crushing people's windpipes because he's angry, or if it was a different one with Savage Opress. It was one of the, like, I know we've seen it at least once before.
Okay.
But it is very not common to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very surprised because
pretty cool though.
My first time watching, I was like, what the heck? That Ithorian is speaking basic. And the second time, I'm like, oh, he's got like a translator thingy. Yeah,
so anyone who doesn't know about Ithorian language or Ithorians very much, they growl. They don't talk. Yeah, they need a translator on their neck.
They speak through their lungs, and it's like a giant sponge. So they don't have a way to speak basic.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And I thought it was super awesome that we got to see what's happening to all the droids after the war.
That was a big one for me too. Yeah, I really quite enjoyed that. I like how they've got planets like Braca, where they're decommissioning older ships from the Republic and the Separatist Alliance, which is the planet that we start off in with Jedi Fallen Order. It's also in the trailer for the Bad Batch. We know we're going to head to Braca eventually. But it's cool to see that Corellia is being used to... we know it ends up being used to make Star Destroyers, but right after the war, though, it makes sense that before the production of new things happens, it's the place of deconstruction for a lot of the old stuff, right?
So melting down a lot of the parts,
smelting down all the metal, and pretty nuts to think maybe some of those TIE fighters out there are just made from recycled metal from droid parts, right?
Yeah, that's probably the case now.
Yeah, maybe that's why they're so crappy.
Or the YT series, get like a modern YT 2400. It's all made of, there's like droid heads everywhere.
Yeah. It's a piece of junk. All those cheap TIE fighters with no shields. No wonder why they're so crappy. They're made out of the same stuff that brought you the droids of the Trade Federation.
That's right. Just made entirely out of B1 battle droids.
Ooh. Well, they don't really talk those ones.
Yeah, the B1s. Yeah, they do.
The B1s. Sorry, I thought you said the B2s. Yeah.
No, those are the base ones. No, the B1s are all nasally. Did we win?
But isn't it good that the base is destroyed?
I actually watched. Man, I feel like they made a huge step down when they gave them their own processors. They should have just kept them all the same as from Phantom Menace.
I actually didn't mind it. I thought it was quite comical. I find them.
That was the problem.
I find them in ways. It's almost. It's funny because they tried to make them. They tried to mass produce cheap stuff, right? So they're not going to be like the crazy AI smart tactical droids that, like in this episode, they're trying to steal the head for. But they're now no longer completely dependent on a radio station ship above the planet, each time, right? Like there must be some sort of master switch, because in episode 3, we do know that the droids were supposed to all shut down wherever they were. So there is some kind of back switch somewhere, but they're not reliant on being radio controlled from like a ship somewhere, right? So it's kind of cool that they went in the direction of improving the technology, but it was also a step down in the sense that now they're just also kind of dumb because their processing unit's not nearly as good as like a tactical droid or even a B2 battle droid, right? So I didn't mind it. I always thought it was kind of a comical evolution of the technology.
What's also interesting is we don't really get these comical versions until Revenge of the Sith in the movies.
Yeah.
Because you still get the radio controlled ones in Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, it seems that way for sure. They did kind of have a few moments in the Geonosian arena where they gave each other looks and stuff when 3PO had his head on the, so they weren't completely mindless, but I think they were still being controlled as well, like by the.
It seemed that way. We never
the towers. Yeah.
None of them spoke anyway. That's for sure.
It would make sense that they made the adjustment after that, because all of a sudden Trade Federation droids needed to be all across the galaxy as quick as possible, and they might not have had the money to constantly have Trade Federation ships above each planet, right? So it makes sense. Fair. And it's also an easy target. Take out the ship and you take out the whole army on the planet, right? So it makes sense that they just were able to produce droids that were self-dependent and were independent. They're, on their own power units and stuff like that.
Which is also at the point where we meet General Grievous, where he shows up.
Yeah. Totally.
It's probably at that same time.
Yeah.
Interesting. I still find the original ones are more menacing.
Yeah.
That doesn't compute.
A little scarier.
You're under arrest.
Sure. Yeah. That doesn't compute. You're under arrest.
You make it sound like George Lucas.
I wonder if he voiced that droid. It makes you wonder. No, he probably
funny. That doesn't compute. You're under arrest.
Yeah, bring in George to do a droid voice any day of the week. I'd be happy with that.
Oh man, that'd be hilarious. I'm in.
And then call the droid THX
1000.
Yeah, THX 1000. He's not a Terminator.
Why not? He could be.
T1000.
Something that actually surprised me is that if all these droids are decommissioned, and this might help answer your question to all of them being shut down, when we finally activated the commander droid, he was able to reactivate all the other droids just through a command sequence, I guess.
Yeah, I think tech has some crazy ability to just make things work with technology, right? So,
well, what they said was his signal's not strong enough, but one can presume it. If he has the ability to do it, if he still had the rest of his body, the rest of his parts, he probably had a strong enough signal, which means.
Oh, so they still can be radio controlled, I guess, somehow. Or overwritten.
No, I think that's because they actually hacked in. But the point I'm getting at is that the command droid was able to activate all the other droids that
were shut down. Yeah. Which
I was very surprised by.
Yeah, so I guess that's why maybe they're so valuable, because tactical droids had almost like admin privileges to activating or deactivating droids themselves.
Yeah, which just probably answers your question to how they shut them all down, the back door.
Yeah, that's true, actually. And then they shut the tactical droids down, yeah. And that would also explain why that was only the last one ever, because
they're the valuable ones.
Yeah, those are the master switches possibly. So
exactly.
Let's just shut all the droids down and get rid of all the ones that could turn them back on again,
It is interesting, though.
Makes sense.
But you would have thought that all those other droids would be out of power or something that.
Yeah. Now that we've been to Corellia, do you think that we'll ever get characters like young Han or Kira showing up in the Bad Batch?
Point, I don't think. I mean, Han would be 3?
Well, he would be. Solo takes place about 5 years after Revenge of the Sith, and he's a teenager, so he would probably be
15,
12
14,
or 13 or something like that. Yeah.
It pains me to say it then, but it's possible.
Well, originally there was supposed to be a very young Han in episode 3, but there was just no time to take that story route.
I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah, George actually did want it to be in the movie, though, until there was just no time. But he wanted young Han to be already paired up with Chewbacca at the time.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, there was some sort of story, and there was concept artwork done for it, and it's in the Star Wars Archives episodes 1 through 3 by Paul Duncan, the Tashin book that I got.
I'm not mistaken, Han and Chewie are actually in the room and Luke and Leia are born, and they shake their little baby hands and meet for the first time.
That's right. You got Grogu.
Yeah,
you got
it's
baby Luke and Leia and little Han. Yeah.
And the whole crew.
Yeah, the whole crew, just babies.
They're all just infants. There's going to be
even Din Djarin. He would be a baby at the time too, like the toddler that we see in the flashbacks. That was during the Clone Wars.
He wasn't a toddler. He was like 9.
No, he wasn't 9. He was like 5 or something like that.
It's not a toddler.
Like when he was taken by
like
the
3.
Okay, all right, sure. Okay, yeah, he was like 4 or 5 or something like that, maybe, when he was taken by the Death Watch. So yeah, he'd be a little guy.
He'd be a youngster, youngling.
Yeah, a kidster. Kidster would no longer be a kidster.
Hey, how come we haven't got a story arc about Kidster yet?
You know what? The only appearance of Kidster that we've ever had since Phantom Menace was on the Star Wars show on YouTube. A couple of years ago, they did a Christmas special and brought in Kidster. And I was blown away, man. Like, I can't believe they found him. He's not even like in the acting world anymore, I don't think. And at least I assume so, because I haven't seen him on anything. And they brought him in, and I was really surprised about that. I was like, oh, this is cool. We get Kidster back. Like, it's looking good, Kidster. It's been a long time.
It's pretty funny. Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool if we...
Kidster was best friends with
Annie.
Baby. Yeah. Well, he was good friends with Annie, but I think he was best friends with Baby Greedo.
That's right, he was. Baby Greedo. Baby... Everyone's got a baby stage.
That's what the prequels are for, so we can see all the characters from all the movies as children.
Yeah, as
little Lando.
As kidsters. Yeah, Kidster Lando.
That's right. You know what? Back on this command droid thing, though, one last thing I want to point out on it. It seems like what they did, which is an incredible scale of technology, is the huge donut ships. They basically just turned those into the command droids.
The Trade Federation.
The ships, the big donut command ships.
Yeah, that was like the brain of the droid armies, right? Which is why they all shut down when Anakin took one of them out. Which also poses a huge issue as to fighting the Clone Wars. If they couldn't have those above every single place where they occupied droids, right?
So they scaled them down and put them into a droid-sized unit, which is pretty interesting to think about. Like, that's a huge way you compress technology over a couple of years, like by that much.
Well, I don't think the whole thing is like the,
it's not one-to-one.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not one. But like the idea of controlling them remotely from somewhere, they just took the whatever concept that they had at the time and we're like, okay, well, we're going to make them all independent, but we're also going to keep them cheap. And they just turned into dummies. Each and every one.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, yeah, that's where commando droids come in and save the day.
Try to be a little bit more competent.
A little smarter. Yeah, a little smarter.
So I have one last thing that kind of annoyed me, to be honest. So
okay.
The basic premise of this episode, they're trying to get the droid brain. And Tech copies it onto that stick, right?
Yeah. And
so then when the two girls, they run off with the droid head and it gets blown up. So they lose their copy. So the only version left is Tech's copy of it. But they gift that copy to the girls. But the thing is, at that point, they could have just duplicated it a second time and both had it.
Yeah. Which, I don't know, maybe they did, I think. Because they're still on their way back to Sid, right? So maybe in the next episode we'll follow up with what happens there. This is the closest episode that we've had to a second in an arc, because this is now a direct follow-up of their relationship with Sid, right?
That's right.
So it's possible that the next episode we'll see exactly kind of what happened there with that.
I hope they did, because if they didn't, then that just... For how clever they are, it would blow my mind that they...
I will say this. The next episode is very likely to be the one that Rex comes back into the show. Because based on the trailer, at least from what I've seen on the trailer, we've now seen every single piece of footage that has existed in an episode so far, except for the moments that he's in the show. All the stuff that I was mentioning last week or last episode with the episode so far, there was a few things that now has shown up in this episode. So the only things that we haven't seen now is Braca and Captain Rex, which are the same episode. So that's likely to be the next one. So
very interesting.
Sid might send them on another adventure to get something from another decommissioning planet. I'm just wondering what that is.
It's a good question. Maybe because they failed to get this one, they're sent to go to a planet with a Trade Federation ship to try and get it again.
Yeah, maybe either that, or maybe there's something else that they're after, or
and don't screw it up like this time.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why they would be on Braca and run into Captain Rex there by accident. Like there's got to be some sort of reason as to why they're there, and there's got to be a reason as to why they're bringing Rex into the show. Because like Dave's not the kind of person that brings characters back needlessly, right? He only brings people back with a purpose. So
yeah. I just wonder if he has the idea to bring them back and then thinks of a story. If he comes with a story like, nah, this person will work.
Yeah. Well, and and we've seen, I think when I say that about Dave, I'm talking about like main characters, because he's said that on an interview before and he was talking about Maul and stuff, but it's also with the likes of any character like that, with that gravitas, like Ahsoka or Rex or whatever, like even Kenobi and such and such. If he's going to use any recycled character that's got a big name to it that isn't Bib Fortuna, like we're likely going to have a better purpose as to why they're showing up, aside from collecting a baby Rancor, which now we have another baby to add onto the list.
It's got to be done apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Something just dawned on me, and it absolutely blows my mind. If Count Dooku and Captain Rex like adopted a kid and named it would be Tyrannus Rex.
Wow. All right, let's move on to the next subject that we have to talk about. We were gonna talk about, however briefly or however long, about the gap between episode 6 and 7 and what kind of story we have in there, as well as what kind of story we could have in there going forward, because of course there's a lot of development happening in this new era of the New Republic, and like there's a decent amount of things in there already. What out of all the material that exists in there, I think the notable things that we have is a comic miniseries called Shattered Empire. There is the Aftermath trilogy of novels. There is The Mandalorian and the shows that will follow that, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, whatever happens after. And later down the timeline, when we get closer to the sequels, we have a book called Bloodline, which fills in some of the political gap with the New Republic and the First Order. That happens about 5 or 6 years before episode 7. Then we have the animated Resistance series, as well as a junior novel called Before the Awakening, which gets into the stories of the main trio of characters in The Force Awakens, which happen in the weeks and months before the film takes place. There's a few other things in there, but those are kind of the big staple things. Can you think of anything else? I'm trying to remember, or if that's it.
You've already reminded me of stuff I'd forgotten about, so I forgot about Aftermath, which actually
the Aftermath books
I think sets most of it in motion.
Oh, the Battlefront 2 campaign is also in that time space, and the part 2 of that campaign, which is even later down the timeline. So we've got a few things.
That's quite a bit, actually.
It is actually a decent amount, but it's not near. I mean, we're talking about a 29-year gap between these trilogies, right?
And everything you listed is either at the very end before the sequels or at the very beginning, right after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, and it's not like there's anything that takes place smack dab between those things either. I mean, I forgot to mention there's like a comic book that fills you in on C-3PO's red arm, but again, like all that stuff exists like really borderline close to Episode 7. So, like I think the topic that I had in mind, the Alphabet Squadron books. Shadowfall, Alphabet Squadron, Victory's Price, which is the new one that just got released as of March this year. Last Shot is a Han Solo and Lando book.
Oh yeah,
I think you read that one.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so that one takes place 7 years after Battle of Yavin, which is, I want to say, like 2 years after Return of the Jedi. So
it's not too far after.
Yeah, it's like right after the Aftermath trilogy wraps up, and like a year after that trilogy wraps up, a year after Battle of Jakku, which is a year after Return of the Jedi. So, again, we're still at the very base of Mandalorian. Still takes place like further down the road than this book.
Mandalorian, and I would say, surprisingly enough, the Aftermath book set most of the stage.
Yeah.
That being said, I never actually read the Leia book, so I don't know what specifically happens there.
Yeah, that one's 28 years after the Battle of Yavin, and I forget exactly when it takes place, but I'm pretty sure it was like 5 or 6 years before Force Awakens. The last notable thing, which I think I've recommended a few times now, is Charles Soule's miniseries for Kylo Ren called The Rise of Kylo Ren. And it fills you in on Ben Solo's turn to the dark side, as well as the Knights of Ren, what that's all about. It was good. It was a good series. Had some connections to the High Republic books that we read recently with the Amaxine stuff, the Amaxine station.
Do you think it would have been worth the movies actually touching on that topic? Either of them?
Honestly, I mean, I think, I've mentioned it before, but with Episode 7 the way it is, I think it could have gone any amount of levels better than what we got as far as connecting it to the previous film. There is zero connection to Episode 6 at all. Like there's hardly anything there, and like if anyone were to go through the movies having never seen Star Wars before, there's this disconnect between that trilogy and the previous 6 films, right? And this comic book arguably should have even been a whole movie in itself. Like the events that transpire there are notable enough that it would have made a decent movie if they had done it, right?
Just from the details, that sounds like there's enough there that they could do a cool premise on it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You know what? People will be very excited to see Luke's Academy.
Yeah, exactly. So, if anyone wants to fill in that story, Rise of Kylo Ren, it's a good series. Yeah, I mean, that's still, though, even that comic book series takes place like maybe a couple of years before Force Awakens, because in the Bloodline book, he still hasn't turned to the dark side at that point. So we know that it's between those 5 years that this comic book takes place. And
that actually makes sense, because in Force Awakens, Hux and even a lot of those soldiers don't seem like they really, I guess, like respect Kylo. I know he has his tantrums and stuff, but if he was like Vader, then he would have an actual like specific place in their command structure, where it kind of feels like they don't really know what to do around him.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what makes Kylo Ren's character the way it is in Episode 7, is how it's presented, right? Still the learner, very much the learner still. But the question kind of at hand here is, aside from the stories that we have borderlining the 2 trilogies that we have, there is close to 20 years worth of time between any kind of staple story that happens in either a comic or a book, whatever. between Mandalorian, which is 5 years after episode 6, and Bloodline, which is the farthest away from TFA that we go, which is about 5 or 6 years again. The gap between those two movies is 29 years. Put those 5 years together as bookends, we get 20 years roughly worth of time that there's nothing. Like no books, no comics, no shows, nothing, right?
And it kind of made me wonder. Generation.
It's a whole generation almost, or even, basically. And it kind of came to my mind a little while ago when you mentioned that Rangers of the New Republic being put on hiatus could potentially be turned into an animated series. Yep. Whether or not that series would take place smack dab in the middle of these two trilogies. It would be because at the same time, the First Order is like growing thing, but also as presented in the Bloodline book, it's very hidden at that point in time, a couple years before The Force Awakens.
And from the info we have on the First Order is they basically just exist in their own pocket of the Outer Rim, and that's why the New Republic doesn't show up and wipe them out, because they're like, hey, we'll just leave them there. They're not going to get in our way or whatever. But they grow in such high technology and they expand so fast at the end because they're hiding all this stuff and no one can explain how. And they push out and they strike by taking out the leadership of the New Republic and then expand from there. But up till that point, there's not a lot that they do.
Right. And they stay very much in the shadows. As presented in that novel, I can tell you that Leia starts to have her suspicions that there's something being funded, like in the political realm. There's people that are supporting something of a growing army, and they hint at it as to like what is to come. Mind you, this book was actually, I think it was released before or around the time that Force Awakens came out. And
really? Okay.
Yeah, so it was very, very vague as to what's actually going on, much like the movie. It did not fill you in on what was happening, right, in the political world. And it was a book all about politics, but it was mainly about the journey of Leia once the galaxy finds out that her father was Darth Vader, because that's not public knowledge, right? And everyone finds out, and it's a devastating moment in her career. But
I assume that's when she starts to back out and become more of the general.
Yeah. She starts to, I think in that book, she starts to forge something of a defense initiative for the New Republic, because they're pretty much demilitarized at that point. But as seen in The Mandalorian, we have the dying ashes of the Empire still in the known space. And the First Order is not really a known thing. Yet the Darth Vader comics more recently pointed out that on Exegol, that business over there is flourishing. Like they're well on the way to having hundreds of those Star Destroyers mass produced and with 1 million more well on the way kind of thing. Like that's all still going on. So it's very like there's a lot of things going on right now where...
Sorry, which timeline was this in? This part?
The newest Darth Vader series takes place between episodes 5 and 6.
Okay.
And Darth Vader goes to Exegol and discovers Palpatine's plans for making these death machines to send out across the galaxy, right? And then, of course, the events of episode 6 happens, and maybe things just get delayed a little while. But there's a lot of these things already in existence, and they're already building the second Death Star. So there's a lot of things that don't really make sense, because he's already got some of these things ready. Like he could just send one of those out to Endor and blow up the planet and all the Rebel Alliance, right? Like why bother sacrificing your body and going through that whole nonsense for nothing, right? It makes no sense. Honestly. Yeah, it makes no sense. Like
down to.
When they did episode 9 and I saw what was going on there, I was like, okay, guess this is canon now, and I hate it, but whatever. I always thought that, oh well, they started making these things maybe 10 years like between the two trilogies kind of thing. Like
they had all that time.
Yeah, like well after Return of the Jedi, when the Emperor's gone and everything, maybe he had a contingency plan where his body was on Exegol that whole time, but he just hadn't built all that other stuff yet, right? It was just kind of his place of hiding or whatever. but he's actually got all this stuff there already. And it's like, that is way ahead of schedule. Like this is, we're talking a trilogy that takes place 29 yeyears later. Like,
so it just
why
sits
wait
there
so
for
long?
30 years.
Yeah. Like why wait so long to bring it out of the closet? I mean, like, you know, was there some technical difficulties for the next 29 years? Like, I just don't understand. I mean, like there's so many continuity problems with this. So
well, I guess all you can say is Palpatine's a real schemy guy. He doesn't want to just show up and fight back. He wants to wait and turn Luke's grandson, or like whatever, like Han and Leia's kid, against them. And then this whole manipulation scheme of cloning Jedi to make Snoke. And yeah. I don't know.
It was my plan all along. I sent Vader to go get his son Luke to bring him before me, only to give him the ultimatum, which he will eventually turn me down, and I will eventually die. I will eventually come back, only to have a Muggle son, which will go have his own daughter, which then I will plan to have her kill me, finally, and I will possess her, and I cannot see that go wrong whatsoever. Also, I want 100 more death machines.
Oh, there's thousands.
Thousands more death machines. And another super weapon planet.
And some slaves.
And some slaves. Oh, and I want another army of stormtroopers, but all in red, because red looks awesome. That's the new color.
What's that planet that's hidden behind that big soup thing that gotta go through the swamp? I want that one.
Yeah. Also, I want a new apprentice again.
Just like so.
give me the boy, that Solo guy.
It's so absurd. Honestly, you write it all down, but
it's so ridiculous. Like when you go to point A to when you go to point A, it ends up becoming a point A to point Z, not point A to point B. It's like you're going from 0 to like 500 in like seconds, right? When you put all these pieces together, makes no sense. You go through the Palpatine plot from a Phantom Menace to Return of the Jedi, makes perfect sense. So there's disconnects, right? And like that's kind of the point. And more recently with all the stuff that they've been putting out to bridge that gap of the two trilogies, so far it hasn't been doing a very good job.
To me, it sounds like they made it worse.
Yeah, they have. With the Vader comics more recently, I've honestly have nothing but good things to say about the Vader comics so far, up until the most recent arc, and it was just not for me. Like, I'll keep reading it, but I mean, it's really not shaping up too well.
I get what they're trying to do, because Palpatine's supposed to be like this all-knowing, all-powerful villain, and what they're trying to say is Palpatine was prepared, even if something went wrong. But the thing is, if it takes 30 years for him to recover, it makes more sense if he wasn't prepared and he had to figure out how to rebuild everything.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And that's where episode 9 just honestly, like I can see why episode 9 ended up being the way it is, because it was like, oh, we got to try and bring relevance to this trilogy. And let's just bring back the biggest, baddest villain that Star Wars has had, right?
Yeah. Well,
so it's like from that standpoint, I get it, but at the same time, it just it brings in so many additional problems to, right? Like countless problems. I
do wonder if at the beginning, Snoke was supposed to be the big bad, bigger. Oh, for sure, yeah, for sure. Than Palps, and then Ryan decided he didn't like him and offed him, and then they're like, now what?
well, we have to consider Colin Trevorrow's script, which got scrapped because Leia was a big part of that script.
Yeah,
and when she died, when Carrie Fisher died, I think it was very difficult for that script to move forward. So he left the project, and then they just brought JJ back. That script ended up getting completely scrapped. Very few things were recycled from that. And we got what we got, which was The Rise of Skywalker. But we've had a discussion before about what they would have done with Colin Trevorrow's script. And there's a lot of cool things in there, like things that actually made that trilogy better in numerous amount of ways, right?
Did you ever do a podcast talking specifically about just that script?
I believe I did, yeah. And I can't remember which one it was called. It was a while ago. It was around the same time that episode 9 came out. And there is one back there if you scroll on all the way back. But, you know, it was interesting. It was very interesting. They would have brought in Mortis, the planet from the Clone Wars, bringing balance to the Force and all that. They would have had some more, of course, way more Leia. And they would have had Force Ghost Luke like haunting Ben Solo. Ben Solo would have not gone back to the light, but driven further into his darkness and become the villain that he always wanted to be, which is what the whole point of his character was all about, right? So like there was a bit more of a linear storytelling from Last Jedi, like way more kind of, they're committed to this Snokeless universe, right?
Yeah.
And yet with episode 9, it's almost like they kind of were like, oh, well, we didn't plan on any of this happening. We didn't plan on losing Colin Trevorrow's script or tossing it out the window or whatever. Let's bring Palpatine back. Let's make Snoke this puppet of his the whole time. The whole time it was his plan. Let's make it all his plan.
It was the easy answer for not knowing what to do. Right?
It's the easy answer. It's the easy way out, right? Like, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it's easy enough just to take the biggest, baddest villain who's been known to have all these contingency plans anyways. And, but that's where it just destroys the canonicity of things, because the entire Aftermath trilogy of books, the Battlefront 2 campaign, the Shattered Empire comics, all those things, they had that event. Even in The Mandalorian, they brought up this event of Project Cinder, like the contingency plan. If the Empire died, if the Emperor died, the Empire would basically dissolve with the rebellion. If possible, they would try and do everything they could to wipe out the galaxy's political parties on either side, because it was to like punish the Empire for the Emperor's death, but B, also just to take the enemy down with the ship kind of thing, right? And that's what Jakku was all about. That's what the Battle of Jakku was for. That's the reason why episode 7, you start off on a dusty ball with crashed ships everywhere, right? So there was this continuity there up until the last movie. But now, why would he have a contingency plan to wipe out everything in the universe
if he's going to rebuild it?
If he's not dead in the first place, right? That like too. if he's got this plan to come back with more stuff, like why would he bother
destroying
wiping out the stuff he has?
Yeah.
Like, it just makes no sense.
No, that's a good point. It makes it. Maybe it's because he's trapped on the other side of the fishbowl, the chicken soup.
Right? Yeah. It's like, I got trillions of dollars anyways. I don't care about a couple 100 ships. Let's just get rid of them and build new ones.
Start over. Don't even have death cannons.
Yeah. I don't care if I have to wait 29 years or 100 years. I've got 20 more bodies and 30 more Snokes to infiltrate.
An army of Snokes.
Yeah, an army of Snokes. Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense, man. It makes no sense. It's disheartening to see all this stuff that makes no sense, because of course we love Star Wars and we want to see Star Wars make sense to us, right? And in a storytelling way. That's what makes it a mythology. Things just have a continuity standpoint to it. So
that's true. Because I wasn't aware of some of the stuff you brought up tonight, and it kind of pains me to hear that as they try to fix it, they make it more of a mess.
Yeah. Well, so my last thing I want to bring up though is like if you were to do, knowing all that stuff now, if you were to do anything with the gap, the 20-year gap that there's still nothing in between those two trilogies, like what would you do with those 20 years? Would you make a show, do a series of books? Would you do an animated show? Like what would you do and what kind of story would it be?
Oh, I would definitely do some shows in there, because I feel like that's where you're going to get a lot of these like Firefly feeling kind of shows. I think that'd be super cool. Mm-hmm. You kind of got that with Mandalorian, but I think you could do more so. But the reason why I really like this era is I love this is kind of one of the EU things that is they need to bring back, and they kind of already have, because you see it, and that's with these different pockets of Imperials that are now all separated into almost their own militaries and their own they like control their own section of the galaxy, right? So they have their own little shattered empire going on. Yeah, exactly. So in the EU, they called themselves warlords.
Yeah.
So you get the Moffs, right? The Moffs that control their section, and then they'd have like all the guys under them. And they started like warring amongst themselves, almost kind of tribal, trying to get, more space, more materials, goods and services. And I think that's just a really cool environment, because then you're also going to be getting like these different groups of Imperials fighting against each other. You can follow other groups that are trying to deal in between that. Yeah, it's just a really interesting point in time where you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a source of opportunity is what it is. I mean, you look at what they're doing with the High Republic, and the question really is, having so many people wanting the Old Republic, like myself, we want to see those thousands of Jedi fighting thousands of Sith back in like thousands of years ago before Phantom Menace kind of thing. But it's not what we got so far. And now we've got this new era that takes place 200 years before the Phantom Menace. And it's like, what do you do with an era like that where there's no known Sith around? And they've been very creative at making a new kind of enemy, right? So like it's 20 years of time is a decent amount, and they could draw this dead empire further out past what we've seen so far, which is the 5-year mark after episode 6. We could see that go up to even 10 years and something. I would still buy that. Empire's a massive thing. It didn't get destroyed with the Death Star. It was everywhere, right?
It was the entire galaxy.
Yeah. So it would take a long time to wheedle it out, right?
You cut the head off the snake. But yeah, maybe that's not the best example. Right. This is more like a Hydra with one big head. You cut off the big head, but there's still like 100,000 below that. It's
like that terrifying YouTube video that I've seen of the spider that the guy stomps on, and then like thousands of little spiders come crawling out of it. Oh,
it's pretty good example, but that's awful.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But yeah, it's an area of opportunity to tell these unique, creative stories using anything by the likes of bounty hunters to smugglers to whatever, right?
How cool would it be to also get a story of like a stormtrooper who you could start like right at the Death Star 2 destruction, and then you could jump ahead where they're now like underneath some commander or whatever, and he's some tyrant, and they're at war against another group of stormtroopers, and you can have them, the morality between that, and then they could try to like have to escape or whatever.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we'd get kind of like a Iden Versio kind of deal going on, for sure. I mean, I would. That would be interesting.
Here's the thing, though. If you're dealing with that kind of situation, because it's Imperial, but I bet you there's certain people within the Empire that were still good and just were dealt a bad hand, right? And they're in a bad situation.
Yeah, totally. We've seen that numerous amount of times now. I mean, like even like so many people, we actually talked about this at some point where there was just going to the Imperial Academy was just a norm, right? Like that was just something that people did because that was a life if you didn't have one already, Yeah, and that's on the military side. But what about even on the political side? You could have like someone who's like a Moff, or say it's the Moff's like kid or whatever, who becomes the heir after the Moff dies in some situation. Yeah, they're now given control of this section of what used to be the Empire. So it'd be stormtroopers under them, whatever, and they could really become good guys, right? It could be like they could be anything. Yeah,
like they'd be their own little like contingent of Imperials, which would actually be the heroes, and they could actually be trying to help people. Like we've never seen stormtroopers do that before.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I wonder about that too. That's another interesting story, one of many that they could tell.
I think they'd be afraid to do that because then suddenly all these maskless people that get killed all the time could be good people. But it makes it kind of great for sure.
I mean, given the dream, I would love to see a show about Luke Skywalker in between these two trilogies. Of course, like that's very unlikely to happen. It's tricky. I mean, and of course we have the inevitable ending that we already have with the likes of The Last Jedi and such. Force Awakens. But that would still be cool to see something in regards to that, or even just some kind of they've been a little more free to say that there's other Force users out there other than Luke Skywalker. I mean, we now know that Ahsoka's kicking around, and we know that Ezra's kicking around. Like, we know that Kanan Jarrus had a kid with Hera Syndulla, Jason Syndulla. We know that he's probably Force affinity and kicking around. You know, like true. There's enough potential out there with Force users.
Think about this, or I'm gonna blow your mind a second time tonight. Kanan's apprentice is Ezra. Ezra's apprentice is Kanan's kid. Full circle.
Well, see, that's what I brought up with Ahsoka. Ahsoka was Anakin's Padawan. Ahsoka and Luke could maybe meet up and something might happen there, right? Like, you never know. Lots of things to speculate on.
Very interesting. And there'll also be the dynamic of almost the Obi-Wan Anakin situation where Ezra, like, I knew you, father. You fought in the Clone Wars. You know, like, we kind of get that whole situation going on, which would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got Street Rat Aladdin back. What's that?
Street Rat.
All right, man. Thanks for coming back on the show. We'll catch you in the next one.
It was fun. I was like chatting stuff like this. Got a blast.
All right, thanks, Blake, for coming in on Star Wars Escape Pod. We're still hanging out, chilling in the midst of space, waiting to get to our next destination. It's felt like it's been ages now since we landed in a cantina, so maybe the next episode we might stop in for a drink somewhere. But thank you all for tuning into the show. We hope you've been enjoying Star Wars Escape Pod as well as Star Wars The Bad Batch on Disney Plus, and all the discussions that we've been having here on the show about that show and so many other forms of Star Wars stories that are happening right now in many forms of different medias. So let us know what you thought of the latest Bad Batch episode, what you're thinking of the Darth Vader series, the War of the Bounty Hunters, whatever it is. We'd love to hear from you guys. Send an email in to swescapepodcast@gmail.com, swescapepodcast on Twitter or Instagram. We also just launched a bit of a test on YouTube. It's a 24/7 live stream of all the most recent episodes. I think that goes back about 6 or 7. There's a playlist going on. And we're just going to continually to update that feed and just see how it goes. If it's successful, maybe we'll leave it up. Otherwise, we'll just knock it down. So be sure to share that with your friends so that we can keep it up. That way, if we see the view count going up, comments coming in, we'll know that you guys are liking that enough that we can justify having it around still. So be sure to check that out and share that with your fellow Star Wars fans. Thank you again for listening to the show. Subscribe, give us a 5-star rating if possible. That helps us out a lot. May the Force be with you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.